My parents told me I was adopted after 30 years, so I found my real family, cut contact, and they still wonder why I don't speak. I'm a 30-year-old woman, and for as long as I can remember, I thought I knew who I was. My parents weren't perfect, but they were my parents. At least that's what I believed for 3 full decades. Then one night, in the middle of a screaming match over something so small I can't even remember what started it, my entire world collapsed with a single sentence. My dad's voice was sharp, almost spitting the words at me. "Why do you act like this when you're not even really ours? You're adopted." At first I thought I misheard him. The room went quiet, my mom's face frozen in a mix of shock and regret. My heart started pounding in my ears, and I could feel my stomach turning like I might throw up. I whispered, "What? What did you just say?" But neither of them answered. They just looked at each other like they'd said too much. The silence was worse than the words themselves. I felt the air leave my lungs like I was being strangled. Every memory I had, family vacations, birthday dinners, Christmas mornings, suddenly felt like lies. I stumbled back against the kitchen counter, gripping the edge because the room was spinning. Finally, my mom muttered under her breath, "Well, you were going to find out eventually." No apology, no compassion, just cold resignation. I wanted to scream, to demand answers, but all I could manage was a broken 30 years? "You kept this from me for 30 years? My voice cracked, and I hated how small and powerless I sounded. They didn't even try to comfort me. My dad just shook his head, muttering something about me being ungrateful. And in that moment, it hit me. This wasn't some accident. They never intended to tell me. The only reason I knew now was because their anger slipped, and suddenly, I realized, I had no idea who I really was. The days after that night felt like a blur. I walked around the house like a stranger, but no one seemed to notice, or maybe they just didn't care. Every time I tried to bring it up, to ask questions, my parents would shut me down. My mom would wave her hand dismissively, saying, "It's not a big deal, stop being dramatic." My dad barely looked at me, his eyes cold and distant. But it was a big deal. It was everything. My whole identity had just been ripped apart, and they acted like I was overreacting. I remember sitting at the kitchen table one morning, staring at my cereal, and whispering, "Why didn't you tell me?" "Why now?" My mom didn't even look up from her phone. "Because you wouldn't have appreciated us if you knew," she said flatly. "We gave you a life. You should be grateful." That word burned like acid in my chest. I thought back to every moment in my childhood when I felt different, when I felt like I didn't belong. The times I was compared to my sister, the times my dad called me the difficult one. Suddenly, all of it made sense, but in the worst possible way. I tried to press them for details. Who were my real parents? Why was I given away? "But they stonewalled me," my dad barked. "Drop it. We raised you." That's all that matters. The thing is, it didn't feel like it mattered. Their refusal to acknowledge the truth hurt more than the truth itself. It wasn't just the secret. It was their coldness, their unwillingness to give me even a shred of compassion. Every night I lay in bed staring at the ceiling, feeling like I'd been living a lie. And every morning I woke up more determined to uncover the truth, whether they wanted me to or not. Growing up, I always felt like I was competing in a game I could never win. My sister Emma was the golden child. She was praised for every little thing, grades, looks, even the way she spoke. Meanwhile, I was always the one being corrected, the one who needed to do better. I thought it was just bad luck, or maybe my parents just didn't understand me. But after learning I was adopted, everything snapped into focus. I remember a dinner not long after the truth came out. Emma casually mentioned a promotion at her job, and my mom's eyes lit up like Christmas lights. "That's my girl, always making us proud." Then she glanced at me, her expression flat. "What about you?" Still struggling to figure things out. The words cut deeper now, because I realized it wasn't just disappointment. It was blood. Emma was their real daughter, the one who carried their DNA. I was the outsider, the shadow sitting at their table. Later that night, I confronted them. Was I treated differently because I wasn't really yours? My dad slammed his fork down and snapped, "Don't start with that nonsense." You always twist things. But his anger only confirmed what I already knew. I started replaying memories in my head. The birthday parties where Emma got bigger gifts. The school plays where my parents forgot to show up. The family photos where I was always standing on the edge. I thought it was favoritism. Now I knew it was something much darker. It wasn't that I wasn't good enough. It was that in their eyes I never truly belonged, and with that realization, I knew I had to dig deeper into where I really came from. Because if they weren't going to give me answers, I would find them myself. Once the truth settled in, I couldn't look at my parents the same way anymore. Every word they spoke, every glance they gave me felt like a reminder of the lie they'd carried for 30 years. I needed answers, real answers, not the dismissive, cold brush-offs they kept throwing at me. One evening, I cornered my mom in the kitchen. My voice was shaking but steady. Who were they? My real parents. What happened to them? She froze, her back turned as she washed dishes. After a pause, she sighed and said, "We saved you from a terrible life." "That's all you need to know," I snapped. "Saved me, or stole me, because right now it feels like you kept me in the dark my entire life." Her face tightened, but she didn't say another word. My dad stormed in, his voice booming. "You should be grateful. We gave you everything. Stop digging into things that don't concern you." But how could it not concern me? This was my life, my identity. That night, I sat in my room scrolling through old files, half hoping I'd find something they missed. I searched online forums, adoption records, anything that could lead me to a trail. My heart raced every time I thought about the possibility of seeing a name, a date, something that tied me to who I really was. The more they resisted, the more determined I became. I wasn't just their ungrateful adopted kid. I was someone's daughter. Someone who had been taken from another world I knew nothing about. And then, in the middle of a late-night search, I stumbled across a record that didn't line up with the birth certificate I grew up with. My hands trembled as I leaned closer to the screen. For the first time, I had a lead. The next morning, I drove straight to the county clerk's office, my hands gripping the steering wheel so tightly they ached. I could barely breathe, rehearsing what I'd say, terrified they'd turn me away. The fluorescent lights inside buzzed above me as I explained I wanted to check old records. The clerk, an older woman with glasses sliding down her nose, gave me a skeptical look but eventually disappeared into the back with my request. I sat in that hard plastic chair, heart hammering like a drum. Every minute felt like an hour until she returned, a manila folder in her hands. She hesitated, almost as if she knew what she was about to hand me would change everything. Sliding it across the counter, she whispered, "You might want to sit down." Inside were adoption papers, my name, my birthday, and signatures I didn't recognize. My knees went weak. It was real. My life had been inked into existence on a document that proved I wasn't theirs, not by blood, not even by honest choice. What broke me wasn't the confirmation. It was the discovery of names. My birth mother's name leapt off the page, scrawled in faded handwriting. Beside it, listed as deceased. My throat tightened, tears blurring the letters. I had never even known her, and yet the loss hit me like a death all over again. Then I saw another line. Father, living. The clerk glanced at me carefully. He's still around. Not far from here. I froze, my hands trembling as I traced the address written neatly on the form. He wasn't just alive, he was only 2 towns away. For 30 years he had been out there. And for 30 years, I had been kept from him. The drive to his house felt endless, every streetlight casting shadows that only deepened my anxiety. My palms were sweaty on the steering wheel, and at least twice I almost turned back. What if he rejected me? What if he had a new family, one that didn't want me barging in after all these years? But something stronger pushed me forward, the need to finally know where I came from. When I pulled up, the house was small, worn, but warm-looking. My chest tightened as I walked up the cracked pathway. I raised my hand to knock, but for a moment I froze, my heartbeat deafening. Finally, I forced myself to tap on the door. It opened slowly, and there he was. A man in his late 50s, graying hair, tired eyes, but the second he looked at me, those eyes widened. He whispered almost to himself, You look just like her." My throat went dry. "Like who?" I asked, though I already knew. His voice broke when he answered, "Your mother. God, you're her spitting image." We stood there, two strangers bound by blood, staring at each other like ghosts had just walked into our lives. Finally, he invited me in. The house smelled faintly of coffee and old books. He sat across from me at the kitchen table, hands trembling as he tried to form words. He told me he had fought for me, that he wanted custody when my mom died, but my adoptive parents shut him out completely. They convinced everyone he was unfit. His voice cracked when he said, "I never stopped wondering where you were. If you were okay." Relief and fury tangled inside me. They hadn't just kept a secret. They had stolen 30 years of my life from the man who should have been there all along. Sitting at that kitchen table, I felt like a child again, desperate for answers. My father's hands shook as he reached for a box tucked away in the corner. He slid it across to me, saying softly, "You deserve to know the truth." Inside were documents, letters, even a few photographs of my mother, her smile eerily similar to mine. But it wasn't just mementos. There were court papers, and that's when everything I thought I knew unraveled even further. According to the files, my adoption wasn't some clean, mutual decision. My mother had trusted my adoptive parents, supposedly her friends, to care for me temporarily after her sudden illness. But when she died, they didn't return me. Instead, they painted my father as unstable, dragging him through court battles until he lost custody. I felt the blood drain from my face as I flipped through page after page of lies. My dad's voice cracked. "They told the judge I was dangerous, that I couldn't provide for you." None of it was true. His eyes welled with tears. "I tried, I swear to you, I tried. They took you away from me." I sat there in stunned silence, my chest aching like someone had punched straight through it. 30 years of my life, my entire identity, had been constructed on deceit. They hadn't just hidden the truth. They had stolen me. Images of my childhood flashed in my mind. My parents' cold dismissals, their constant comparisons, their resentment whenever I questioned them. It wasn't parenting. It was possession. My hands clenched into fists as the rage set in. For years I thought I was broken, but in reality, I had been a prisoner of their lies, and for the first time, I realized I couldn't let this go. I had to confront them, armed with the truth they thought I'd never find. I don't even remember the drive back to my parents' house. My hands gripped the steering wheel like I was holding on for dear life, my chest tight with rage. The documents my father had given me sat on the passenger seat, each page screaming proof of the betrayal I had lived under for decades. By the time I pulled into their driveway, my whole body was trembling, not from fear, but from the weight of everything I was about to unleash. When I walked inside, they were sitting in the living room like it was any ordinary day. My mom glanced up from her knitting, my dad from his newspaper. I threw the folder onto the coffee table. The papers fanned out, exposing the lies they had buried. "Care to explain this?" My voice cracked, but it was loud, sharp, impossible to ignore. My mom's lips tightened, and she didn't reach for the papers. My dad, however, slammed his hand down on them. "Where did you get this?" His tone was defensive, not guilty, like I had no right to the truth of my own life. I leaned forward, my voice shaking with rage. "You didn't save me. You stole me. You lied to the courts. You lied to me. You kept me from my father for 30 years. My mom had the audacity to scoff. We gave you a better life. Do you really think you'd be better off with him? We're the reason you had a roof over your head. You should be thanking us." Her words burned into me like acid.
"They weren't sorry."
They weren't even capable of regret. To them, I was property, something they had won and refused to lose. And in that moment, I knew what I had to do. If they wouldn't give me remorse, then I'd give them silence. I thought maybe, just maybe, someone in my family would understand. That night I called my sister Emma, hoping she'd at least give me some validation. My voice was shaky as I told her everything. How I found Dad, the documents, the truth about how our parents had stolen me. There was a pause on the other end of the line, long enough to give me a flicker of hope. But then she laughed. "You're so dramatic," she sneered. You should be thankful they took you in. Do you know how many kids rot in foster care? You got lucky. Her words crushed me. Lucky. Was I lucky to grow up feeling like an outsider? Lucky to have been lied to for 30 years. Lucky to have been robbed of a real father who wanted me. My chest tightened as I realized Emma wasn't on my side. She never had been. I hung up before she could say anything else, but the damage was done. Sitting alone in my apartment, the silence was unbearable. The weight of every betrayal pressed down on me until I couldn't breathe. My chest felt hollow, my hands shook, and tears streamed down my face as I whispered to no one. Maybe I was never meant to belong anywhere. The walls felt like they were closing in. I curled up on the couch, clutching a pillow like it was the only thing keeping me from falling apart completely. For the first time, I questioned if I even had the strength to keep going. My parents had stolen my past, my sister dismissed my pain, and I was left stranded in a sea of lies. It was the lowest point of my life. But in that darkness, a thought flickered, a fragile, desperate spark. Maybe belonging wasn't about them at all. Maybe it was about me finding where I was truly wanted. After that night, I stopped waiting for my adoptive family to care. I realized their version of love had always come with conditions: obedience, silence, gratitude for lies I never asked for. If I wanted real love, I had to seek it elsewhere. And so, I went back to the only person who had ever fought for me: my father. Walking into his home the next weekend felt like stepping into a different world. The walls were lined with photographs, family gatherings, old birthdays, even framed pictures of my mom. My chest ached as I stared at her smile, realizing I had her same eyes. My father noticed and gently said, "She would have been so proud of you." That evening, he introduced me to relatives I never knew I had. An aunt with the same laugh as mine, cousins who welcomed me with open arms. For the first time in my life, no one was comparing me. No one was keeping me at arm's length. They hugged me like I belonged, and I felt it, deep in my bones, that this was home. We ate together, laughed together, and they told me stories about my mother, how stubborn she was, how fiercely she loved, how she never gave up on the people she cared about. Each story stitched together a part of my broken identity. I wasn't the difficult one. I wasn't the outsider. I was hers. Driving home later, I couldn't stop crying. But they weren't tears of despair this time. They were tears of relief. For the first time, I felt seen. And as I clutched the family photo my aunt insisted I take, I knew what I had to do. Cutting ties with the people who raised me wasn't betrayal. It was survival. It didn't take long before my adoptive parents noticed my absence. The call started, first subtle, then demanding. One voicemail from my mom still plays in my head. "You're embarrassing us by ignoring us. You need to come home." The word home made me sick. Still, part of me needed to face them one last time, not for closure, but for myself. When I walked through the door, the house felt smaller, colder, as if all the warmth had drained out with the truth. They were waiting in the living room, my dad with his arms crossed, my mom perched on the couch with that same condescending look. My dad barked, "So you think you're too good for us now? After everything we've done for you?" My voice shook at first, but then grew steady. "Everything you've done? You stole me. You lied to me. You made me feel like I was broken when really you were the ones who were cruel." My mom rolled her eyes. Ungrateful, as always. That single word snapped something inside me. For years I let them define me, shame me, shrink me, but not anymore. No, I'm not ungrateful. I'm free. And you don't get to control me anymore. My voice cracked, but it was louder than their silence. I laid it all out. The favoritism, the gaslighting, the decades of lies. Every memory that had cut me, I handed back to them like shards of glass. My mom's face stayed tight. My dad's anger simmered, but I didn't care. Their reaction didn't matter anymore, and when I walked out of that house, slamming the door behind me, I knew it was the last time I'd ever hear them call me their child. It's been months since I walked out of that house for the last time, and not once have I looked back. At first, the silence felt strange. No phone calls, no fake pleasantries, no guilt trips. Just quiet. But slowly that quiet turned into peace. I realized I wasn't missing a family. I was finally free from people who never truly saw me as their own. Now, I spend my weekends with my real father. He tells me stories about my mom, how stubborn she was, how she used to sing while cooking, how she loved fiercely and unapologetically. We've shared meals, tears, and even laughter I never thought I'd be capable of again. And every time I sit at his kitchen table, surrounded by relatives who welcome me with open arms, I feel something I never did in 30 years with my adoptive parents: belonging. Sometimes my parents still try to reach out. They send letters, voicemails filled with self-pity, asking why I've cut them off. The irony stings. They still wonder why I don't speak to them, as if stealing my identity, my childhood, and my father wasn't reason enough. But here's what I've learned. Blood doesn't make a family. Love does. And sometimes, choosing yourself means letting go of the people who raised you, but broke you in the process. I'm no longer the ungrateful daughter. I'm not the difficult one. I am my mother's child, my father's daughter, and my own person. If there's one thing I want anyone listening to take away, it's this: you don't owe loyalty to people who hurt you. Cutting ties with them wasn't the loss I feared. It was the liberation I needed. And for the first time in my life, I finally feel whole.